All right, everybody, we are going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome one, welcome all to the Track I final presentations. Congratulations to those of you who are participating this weekend. What a weekend. I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired, and I'm not even one of the participants. You guys have been working hard, and we are so excited for you. It's been quite a weekend, and we've looked at a variety of different problems this weekend, which is what's so exciting about Track I and Track J, the continuing tracks. You know, you started off and Beat the Pandemic 1, working on all sorts of different problems in your respective tracks. And then we all came together here to look at the progress you've made so far and how you can continue to advance that. So thank you. And on the topic of progress, we've seen so much progress from, each of your own individual projects, but also for each of you as individuals, both personally and professionally, as you've built teams and as you've expanded upon your teams. So I think, from my perspective, that's what's most interesting is how you can go and say you're going to have an impact, but then how you actually go and do it. For me, that's what's most important. And that's what we teach, we preach at MIT. So it's wonderful to see that from all of you. And if you wouldn't mind just advancing to the next slide here, Henry, and we'll go one more as well. So this weekend has been fun-filled, and this is why you're so tired, right? Friday night, we pitched all the continuing teams. You pitched your ideas and the progress you've made so far to mix and mingle with new participants who've joined us for this weekend. And I know there's been a lot of great connections made between new participants and the continuing teams. We always say at MIT that it's about the team, not the idea, because it's the team that's able to execute. So we love to see the diversity of skill sets kind of being built upon. You worked, you hacked, and you gathered feedback. We saw a lot of great connections between the continuing teams and the mentors. And we love to see that because we know that you need that expertise. And that's one of the ways that we're trying to help you to advance your ideas. You took that feedback and you iterated, and we saw that. It was really nice to see that because, during the practice pitches over the course of this weekend, we provided a lot of feedback, us and the mentors alike. And we saw you make those changes between last night and today, and we'll see the final presentations of those in just a moment. And that's what brings us to this last step in the hackathon process. The presentations, that's what we're here for, and we're really, really excited about it. And if you wouldn't mind just going on to the next slide, I'd like to introduce the wonderful judges who have taken time out of their weekend to come watch your pitches, provide feedback, and decide ultimately who's going to win for Track I. So first, I'd love to introduce Kara, who runs sourcing and the entire portfolio for Johnson & Johnson Innovation in their J-Labs program. Next up is Mart. Mart is the head of the Netherlands Innovation Network here in Boston. He's really focused on bridging the tech ecosystems between the US and the Netherlands. Next, we have Sarmed, who leads public health strategy at the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. They're the ones who are really coordinating the federal response to the opioid epidemic. And last but not least, we have Kieran. Kieran's a professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins. She is also the JHU Department of Medicine, Vice Chair for Innovation and Healthcare Implementation, which means she's really looking at taking things and going and commercializing them. And so we're really, really excited to have all of you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. It's truly incredible to have you here with us and to have your feedback for the teams. And Henry, if you wouldn't mind just advancing a couple slides here. So now let's look at the judging criteria and how the teams are going to be judged. Since this is a continuing track with teams that started and Beat the Pandemic 1, one of our first hackathons, and are now continuing on, we'll be looking not only at the 4 core pillars of the judging criteria for the MIT COVID-19 Challenge, which are impact, innovation, implementation, and presentation, but also looking at the progress that the teams made between the first Beat the Pandemic hackathon and now, as well as the progress that has been made over the course of this weekend. So it's really important to note that we'll be looking at the weight between the 4 core pillars and the progress that you've made. And Henry, if you could just advance a slide. So now what I'd like to do is walk you through the logistics of this Zoom session. I know there's a lot of information here, but it's really important that the teams understand this. The first thing I'd like to mention is that all of these presentations will be recorded. So this session is being recorded, and we just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. For teams, multiple team members can present and answer Q&A. We definitely recommend that one team member present, but that is up to you ultimately. Next up, you have 3 minutes to present, and then you'll get 2 minutes of Q&A from the judges. That 3 minutes of presentation time, as you know, as we've shared throughout the weekend, is a hard stop. At 3 minutes, we will stop you just for the sake of time to make sure that not only we can continue moving through the final presentations, but also to keep it fair for all of our presenters. The order has already been shared. It is in the Slack channel. We will share it. And before each team goes, we'll also let you know who is up next so that you have 5 minutes of advance notice for your presentation. If you are going to be presenting for your team, please raise your hand so that we can unmute you. We want to make sure that only those who are presenting are able to speak so that we don't have any issues here. Next up, when it's your turn to present, please unmute yourself and turn on your video if you would like to. And Henry, who is our other track lead, will be flipping through your slides. So please just say next slide and we'll move right on. We will try to give you a 1-minute warning just by indicating, by waving in the camera. So please try to keep my image in view while you present. And last but not least, the judges will be picking 3 winners out of our teams. So if there's anything that's motivating, it should be that. 3 of the top teams from this track will be winners of the Beat the Pandemic 2 hackathon. And now, if you wouldn't mind just advancing the slide, Henry. All right, so we're going to do this ready, set, present. So please, when it's your turn to present, raise your hand. I will ask you to unmute yourself via Zoom. You will have those 3 minutes to present with a hard stop, and then we'll go to the 2 minutes of Q&A from the judges. Judges, you should have the link to the form to fill out for each team, which will help us in the deliberations afterwards. If you do need a quick reference to that, it is in the judging Slack channel. All right, if we could just go to the next slide, Henry. And now here's the order of the final presentations. We will, again, give you 5 minutes advance notice when it's your turn. And if you just want to take a quick look at where you are in the queue, this is your reference point. It's also still back in our track Slack channel. Next slide. All right, so first up, we are going to have Team Citizen Science. If you wouldn't mind just raising your hand in the Zoom room, which you can do by clicking participants at the bottom, and then there's a raise hand button. All right, Carlo, you are up. Looking forward to it.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, that we can.
Awesome. Well, then I'll go ahead and just start. So this is Citizen Science Incorporated. It is an evolution from phase 1 of Beat the Pandemic. We have a couple of new faces from our old team. But going ahead and advance the next slide, you'll see that we created an environment that allows us to help patients and caregivers be able to do a better navigated job going across healthcare, because before COVID-19, healthcare was very confusing and a pandemic didn't make it any easier for anyone. So essentially our solution is a merger between 23andMe's direct-to-consumer model and Omada's health and behavioral intervention guided platform to help users with chronic diseases. On the next slide, you can go ahead and see that we're really focusing on this track to be focusing on breathing modalities and behavioral interventions like social isolation, PPE, where the last track was more therapeutic and diagnostic heavy. So hopping on to the next slide, you'll go ahead and see that we are focusing on that path, essentially so that we can be better positioned to engage with payer pilots and ultimately white label our solution for life science organizations. Onto the next slide, you'll go ahead and see that when you hit play really quickly for us, please, that this is a landing page that's live right now on the internet that a user that's a patient or caregiver can go ahead and log into and figure out why this is useful for them and why we're generating real world data from these demographic and patient reported outcomes. Essentially, we can let people that are able to figure out where they can get access from a regional location and a rural perspective to therapeutic and services, as well as figuring out where they can get direct-to-consumer products and filtering it based on interest to them, if it's something in purchase or something behavioral they can use themselves. If they had a pulse oximeter, they could report their readings, as well as being able to have a longitudinal record to be able to hopefully alert and guide them to know when to call a healthcare provider and to have guided practices to implement those breathing modalities. On to the next slide, we focused on prevention because the ROI for preventative services is much more drastic than focusing on treatments which are in development. On to the next slide. You go ahead and see that the patient journey is very convoluted and unguided. And essentially, we made a user experience for patients and caregivers that's very linear so that we can produce better consolidated real world data. And then we're able to have a better demographic population and patient-reported outcome insights. Onto the next slide for us, please. You can see that our differentiation is we're not behind a paywall so that somebody doesn't have to go through an insurance group, or we're limited by a healthcare network to gain access, and we're not limited by a certain disease indication since we can grow with a behavioral modality going after this. Onto the next slide. You go ahead and see that the market size for healthcare analytics is growing at a compound annual growth rate of 23.4% every year. On the next slide, this means that this is not a product. We actually have a potential business because of the ability to support patients and caregivers and generate better real world data. Next slide, to growing epidemiology around COVID-19. And this is the team that came together to help healthcare providers understand more about patients instead of diseases. Very last slide for us. We'll just leave it here to have a visual representation for the Q&A. And we have an appendix deck if we have a question guided to one of those questions. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. And now we'll open it up to the judges for 2 minutes of questions.
Thank you. Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Hi.
Yes.
I can.
Oh, okay, it says I'm muted. Perfect. So no, it was a great presentation. So I'm just curious, 2 questions. One is your revenue model. And secondly, I'm just unsure of how physicians could then see this information. Could you kind of explain that?
Yeah, for the second one, the physician experience, what we showcased was a user-patient caregiving user experience, but very similar to how UpToDate has a front end and back end for who's viewing that platform, if you're a user or provider. That would be how we can help with care guidelines around use of these devices. And the first question, the revenue model. Right now, we're in a world of fee for service, and we're going to value-based care, so better population data from a vulnerable perspective, especially uninsured or underinsured patients, allows potential penetration for future products into that market. So revenue strategy of licensing real world data and also impacting value-based care metrics for payers, which essentially is a lot of money. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Hey, Carlo, it's Sarmed. What partnerships do you anticipate securing, or what partnerships have you secured since the first hackathon?
Yeah, so we've engaged with a number of venture capital groups as well as a large number of life science manufacturers to make sure we're building environments that they'll be focusing on, particularly in long-term outcomes. So if everyone's focusing on a vaccine prevention model, we're looking at the long-term outcomes of where SARS and MERS have patients with long-term deleterious effects, or even polio developing 40 years later, neurological issues. So that's the long-term patient cohort we're working with right now. And the industry looking to solve those problems is going to be slower to catch up. So we're going to get ready for them right when we realize that's an issue, especially for vulnerable patient populations.
If there's time for one last, oh, sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Yes, there is time.
It's all you.
How are you going to keep up with the evolving dynamics of direct-to-consumer access links and products?
Yeah, so I would say that our specialty is market access, being able to navigate the different potential care routes, while also breaking it down to support underinsured and non-insured patient populations. But that access, there's a whole bunch of utilization management. And luckily, that's really antiquated technology that we developed natural language processing to be able to scrape in a very routine fashion, and then confirm by using EMR data systems that are readily available. Market access is confusing. We worked on solving that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carlo and team. With that, we are out of time and we will need to move on to the next presentation.
Thank you.
All right, next up is COVENGERSAI. You should be unmuted now.
Hi.
If not, just let me know.
Hi, am I audible to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. We are team COVENGERSAI, and we are here to arm the doctors with data in this fight against pandemics. Next, please. Next, please. So we know that the coronavirus is killing people every few minutes, and the damage is not linear. Next, please. Not just linear. In this pandemic and in every pandemic, the pathogen is novel and the vaccine development is slow. So the only way in which you can save lives and have any sense of returning to normalcy is to quickly understand a therapy that works, and then have this information from different clinicians trying different things across the globe to be communicated to different clinicians quickly across the globe as well. However, next please, this is not possible currently because of there being no central health data repository. So this is precisely the problem we want to solve by building one, wherein a central health data repository could quickly tell you in a dashboard that is like the one we have developed in an MVP, where it is quickly available to the clinicians to understand what therapies are being tried and what is working and what is not. Next, please. So our strategy is to collect data from all these sources and to process it separately and not together so that there is reliability in them. Next, please. And the scores will be, when now a patient comes into the clinic, the clinician can, based on their symptoms, have efficacy scores for what treatments are best for this specific category of patients, which would be determined by the inbuilt artificial intelligence systems in the platform. Next, please. So we believe that with all our partnerships in place, we'll be able to launch by August 2020. We have the MVP ready right now, and we'll be able to generate insights by December. Next, please. So we believe that we won't even only save lives by helping clinicians and patients, but also pharma industry and research would generate novel insights from this data, and that would help them identify interesting leads and move ahead in understanding this disease better. Next, please. So post the hackathon 1, where this idea was set in stone and we started establishing partnerships, we first created synthetic data set from the literature, because I am a scientist and you tend to do that. The next thing we did was an MVP creation platform that you saw in the past with all those dashboards, which is ready to use. And we started having conversations with governments and different hospital chains in El Salvador and India. Next, please. In the last 48 hours, we took a lot of feedback on our MVP from clinicians, and then to find out what all features to add, we got some interesting inputs. I'm also happy to say that we have 2 government hospitals in India which have been ready to share their protocols, and ongoing partnerships with One Up Health and InterSystems are in discussion. Next, please. We are also discussing with similar initiatives by a mentor, a pandemic initiative, to partner with them, especially in Asia. And we are also partnering with different teams working with clinicians who are on the forefront of treating COVID. Next, please. So I believe that with humans should come together right now, as major climate changes are creating more epidemics and pandemics, and use this time to create infrastructures that would not just solve this, but every epidemic pandemic situation arising in future. Next, please. The next, please. So this is a not-for-profit and open initiative, and I want to use this platform to ask for every person in the healthcare domain to pledge their support to help us in like helping save lives. Next, please. This is our team, and please add yourself to it if you are motivated by our mission. Next, please. And special thanks to the mentors who have been helping us since the last hackathon and this one. Next, please. And we believe that humans together can solve everything. So please join us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And now we'll move it on to 2 minutes of Q&A.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And great progress. I saw you guys during the first hack as well. So a lot has happened since.
Thank you.
A question on the data, because I see you have data partnerships in store. You have them, but if you need the global data, you need a lot, right? So I wonder, how are you going to mine it and collect it? And also, I think, how do you think about interoperability of different systems worldwide, and how data is brought into your database?
Right. So we understood the precise problems that you have highlighted while we started doing this. And therefore, we started partnering with different systems like InterSystems and One Up Health, which can have like even say data from New York City, which would be very multicultural. So that is one way to go about it. The other way, yes, you're right. We have identified pockets by creating some surveys where people will be more eager to share data. And that's how we are approaching our partnerships, to make it happen fast and make ourselves useful, especially in this pandemic. And for the rest, which are uncrackable systems, we are thinking of really doing partnerships with more aggregators and healthcare platforms, and also to build some custom solutions as and when needed in infrastructures where they do not exist. So it will be a slow process for this one, but I think we'll become pandemic proof for the next one.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think with that, we can probably move on to the next team. Thank you so much. Next up, we will have team COVID Community Vulnerability Index.
Can you hear me?
Yes, whenever you're ready.
Hello, Savannah, are you there as well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, I will start. Effective resource distribution. Sorry? Oh, I think I'm rehearing myself. Effective resource distribution has always been a problem for cities, but with COVID-19, the stress is even higher. Next slide, 4 times, please. As budgets are facing cuts and shortfalls due to COVID-19, cities and organizations are strapped for resources and for information. Next slide, 4 times. And now more than ever, there is a need for quicker, more informed decisions about how to best distribute resources, both by politicians, organizations, and by healthcare administrators. During a pandemic, quicker, more informed decisions literally equals saved lives. But information about the impact of COVID is not easily accessible or understandable, and current community needs assessment tools are really not prepared for the breadth of COVID's impact. Next slide, please. Our solution to this problem started during the first MIT COVID-19 challenge, where we started to develop an index to effectively target mobile health resources. And we've grown a lot since then. We built out our team, performed an extensive literature review, which is ongoing, developed these 8 different indices to describe different axes of need, with each index incorporating a range of different key socioeconomic, health, and demographic indicators, and built and launched a beta dashboard so users can interact with our indices and the underlying data, which is on the next slide. This is our beta dashboard, which is an interactive dashboard that maps different risk assessment scores for our 8 different indices at the county level for the entire US. It makes it easier for policymakers, nonprofits, and organizations to make informed decisions about resource distribution. But we also intend this for community members to have information to advocate for themselves and for their own communities. Also, as a part of this process, we compiled and cleaned an extensive integrated data set, which is valuable and available to researchers and developers. Next slide.
This weekend, we've entered phase 2 of our project, where we're focusing on improving our existing data methodology and launching and scalar user testing. Next slide. We conducted further research into existing similar products and identified our project's key strengths, which is quantifying needs along multiple axes rather than offering a single community risk score. We also researched additional statistical models and new indicators to incorporate, and backend improvement is ongoing. Next slide. We conducted web exploration and interviews with 7 individuals across our range of target users, including public policy and data researchers, healthcare professionals, nonprofit and community leaders, and concerned citizens. We received useful feedback on both our index methodology and on the usability of our platform. We're now working on scaling up this user testing and incorporating the additional feedback. Next slide. A key takeaway from our user testing so far was difficulty with locating critical methodology and background information. To address this, we're building out a full website, which the dashboard will be embedded in, to improve user experience and to allow us additional control over the design. Next slide. Our multidisciplinary team covers fields from data science and machine learning to urban policy to public health to psychology, and has enabled us to develop a comprehensive and accurate dashboard. We're also grateful to have had international participants during this hackathon to offer new insights to our team. Next slide. Thank you, and please feel free to play with our dashboard or reach out to us for more information.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. I think we'll move on to 2 minutes of Q&A. Just a quick reminder, team COVID Compass, if you could please raise your hand so that we have you queued up for your presentation. Thanks.
I had a question. Just this was group number 1, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And thank you so much for your presentation. You've really made a lot of progress. You can tell from your presentation. I was just curious, is this going to be provided as in a not-for-profit kind of platform for governments and local communities?
Yeah, so right now it's entirely an open source project, which is accessible to anyone. And we're actually working with a mentor on kind of scaling up our sustainability and different ways to do that. So we do want it to be open access so that nonprofits can use it free of charge. So we're looking at different ways to facilitate that, whether it's like applying for grants or having some kind of paid version in addition to the open version.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, great presentation, guys. What data sources are you guys using to ensure that this is as real time as possible?
Yeah, so we use a variety of data sources. The COVID specific data is pulled from, well, we use the New York Times GitHub interface, which is updated daily with the information from the CDC and some local governments. And then a lot of the demographic information is taken from various community research organizations. So we've worked with the County Health Rankings and Roadmaps program for a lot of the data, and then exists other information from the CDC and similar research institutes that are collecting this data. So we try to use the most updated information as possible, although a lot of the data sources are only updated on the like 6 months to 1 year time scale that gives you know, more of the like health infrastructure information. But we're looking for ways to incorporate more like you know, daily changing data as well.
And we have a methodology section that can be clicked into, which lists out all the data sources and how they're weighted and where they came from and how they're being updated.
Awesome, thanks team. We do need to move on to the next team, COVID Compass. Prathamesh, I'm going to ask you to unmute. I see you in here. Hopefully we can get you kicked off and started here. And then if you could just go back one slide, Henry. So the next team up is COVEMD. Please raise your hand in the Zoom room. You can do that by clicking participants at the bottom and then choosing raise hand. Thanks so much.
So can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hello everyone. We are Compass, an SMS-based telemedicine platform aiming to mitigate the disproportionate effects of the coronavirus in dense, low-income populations. Next, please. COVID-19 has spread rapidly in low-income populations for a plethora of reasons, and the best preventative measure for mitigating the spread is triaging. After speaking to public health experts, however, we realized that the current triaging systems are ineffective in these low-income populations because they fail to address how a person can get tested after receiving a diagnosis. This is because many people lack insurance or Medicaid in Missouri. Next. Our solution addresses this problem by creating a technical and operational workflow that can be rapidly implemented with the help of our partners. Our technical workflow includes an SMS system built through Twilio. The responses to our questions are used to assess risk. These responses are also securely stored, maintaining HIPAA compliance through an Azure database. The patient is then given a unique code they can present at the partnering testing center to get tested. Next. On the back end, what makes our platform unique is the operational workflow. We partner with local testing centers and enter into an agreement such that any person that comes to the testing center, regardless of their insurance or Medicaid status, can get tested. Next. So our solution is uniquely beneficial because it helps housing centers organize testing, is simple to use because it's built through an SMS platform, not a third-party app, and it addresses how a patient can get tested rather than just whether a patient should or shouldn't get tested. Next, please. In terms of our progress, we finished the product, we finished a website, and we're ready to deploy. We've gained partners and supporters from major healthcare organizations such as Affinia Healthcare, United Way, Luminaire, FCHC, and more. And we also won the Microsoft Award at Berkeley. So we're currently in the phase of deploying a pilot right now. Next, please. So these are just some of our supporters that we're still reaching out. We've already partnered with these ones. We're still reaching out to other supporters in the coming week, hoping to get more, but we're planning on deploying this Monday for our initial pilot test. Next. All right, thank you everybody for listening. If you have any other questions, so the appendix, the comment question section, it covers everything from how do we maintain HIPAA compliance, the accessibility to legality and liability, and our progress in the past 48 hours as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for this presentation. Really interesting. I think this is a really important area we need to address. Just curious if you have done any voice of customer type feedback as to whether minorities, particularly those who might not be in the country legally, whether they were open to filling this out, whether they were more or less likely to do this?
Sure, sure. So in terms of the information we collect, there's no way to identify whether a person is in this country illegally or their race or any personal identifying information, because that's not what we collect within our triaging questions. The triaging questions are solely like symptoms-based and workplace, houseplace contact and that type of stuff. But we don't cover anything from name, age, any identifying information because we want to avoid storing that for HIPAA compliant reasons.
No, but curious from their perspective if they were.
Yeah. So we haven't had a chance to interview perhaps like people that may be here illegally, but we have reached out to Doorways and gotten surveys there in terms of what their people think, whether they would use this system or not.
Okay, thank you.
Does the relationship with the partners end or only include testing, or does it also include managed care?
Yeah, so our relationship extends both to the testing centers and the housing communities. So in order to get the product in the people's hands, we are reaching out to specific housing communities like Doorways, Covenant House, and these are St. Louis specific. And then we're also partnering with United Way in order to get our SMS number to the people that need it most. On the other side, we partner with testing centers in order to make sure that they know we're sending people over to them and they won't turn people down because of an insurance or Medicaid status issue.
All right, excellent. Thanks
Great.
so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
We'll go ahead and move on to our next team, which is CoveMD.
Hi, thank you everyone. The virus doesn't care about borders. Our solutions to COVID-19 shouldn't either. Next slide, please. Through our international survey of hundreds of doctors, we found the following problems. Yes, there are publications on COVID, but there's just not enough time to digest all. So they turn to guidelines, only to be disappointed many areas are not covered. While there are paid knowledge databases like UpToDate, no company has hired enough writers to cover every aspect of this rapidly changing pandemic. What's more, even if the user knows more than the website, they can't contribute. Next slide. Our existing solution, CoveMD.org, provides forum and chat rooms for doctors to share educational resources and mentorship, and has gotten some good traction. However, the feedback helped us understand many clinicians prefer more structured, asynchronous communication. Next slide. We extended our project to clinicianwiki.com, an open, updated, and interactive knowledge base for clinicians. It was created from 0 to 1 over the whole weekend and is now available on all platforms. Before we dive into Clinician Wiki, let's first look at other medical wikis. Next slide. 64% of them are no longer functioning. Most of them are not interactive, and sadly, none of them provides valuable information on COVID. This taught us the importance of engaging with an active community, make the platform interactive and credible during the pandemic of both disease and misinformation. So we created a Wikipedia with the additional features in the next slide. For interactivity, each wiki article will have a discussion forum. Users can create polls to quickly gather consensus on standard of care and vote to put good contribution on the spotlight. In the next slide, for credibility, only clinicians and researchers from approved institutions can sign up, and their edits will be shown in a different color until a senior doctor approves the content. This allows timely communication, but also minimize the potential bias. Next slide. After this pitch, we aim to integrate social media so that users can easily share articles. We will also give shareable recognition based on the frequency, amount, and quality of edits. This helps with community bonding and our publicity. Next slide. We have contacted a group of doctors at Cambridge who are willing to contribute initial content. We will work with hospitals and existing platforms for more content, tech firms and media outlets for publicity. We will also have an international outreach by recruiting medical translators. The platform will be non-profit, but we hope to generate revenue through public, crowdfunding, and advertisement to cover marketing and maintenance costs. Actually, I'm excited to share that many content platforms in this hackathon have indicated their willingness to share their content on our platform. Next slide, please. So thank you for your attention. We hope you can join us to make medicine more collaborative. Now I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. And we'll transition it over to 2 minutes of Q&A.
Thank you for that presentation and great progress you've made. I'm wondering about the vetting of the information. So how are you going to curate the different sources of info, and who's going to be doing that?
Yes. So in the moderator function that we introduced previously, I think we would like to invite senior clinicians to become moderators for our content. So we actually have talked to a few senior surgeons and clinician medical doctors in Cambridge who are willing to be the moderator for their specialty. So what their job is to do is to look at what's written in the wiki and the sources, the references that the writer provides to see if they can derive a similar conclusion from the source to whatever is written. And also, just to add on, I think we are creating like a Wikipedia style. So it aims to be like a summarized sheet for clinicians to look at. But I think just like every research will know, we don't really quote the Wikipedia. So I hope that this resource will also direct the clinicians to the primary research, but it will just expedite the process and give them a quick overview of what is happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had actually a little bit more of a comment. I guess I have to say I was a little skeptical when you talked about the wiki, when you talked about that actually it seems like when you looked at all the wikis, medical wikis that are still around, that they almost seem like they're kind of dying on the vine, but it seems like you've kind of reinvigorated some of the thoughts around this by incorporating social media and making it a little bit more active. So my skepticism was resolved then. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I think previously, maybe the wikis didn't work because we have never faced such a public health challenge like the COVID-19. So I really think that maybe it's like a blessing in disguise that we finally realized that medicine can be much more collaborative after the pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. And with that, we will move on to our next team, CrowdLess.
Thank you so much.
And if I can just ask the next team, doctors at home, to please raise your hand.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chirag from CrowdLess.
Yeah, and I just want to pause for 1 second and call out that this is the 6th team, but you'll notice the team track number at the top of the orange slide, judges. If you do have any questions, you can just direct message me in the Zoom chat.
Okay, can I start?
Yes, we will start the 3-minute timer now.
Yeah, next slide. So we are called CrowdLess. Next slide. So we are preventing exposure of vulnerable populations and we are avoiding people that are standing in long lines to spend much less time in waiting for their turn to come to the supermarkets. So next slide. So retailers are losing so much money on having more staff, taking care of people, applying preventing measures, and it's really a big hassle for them. Next slide. Next slide. So the immunocompromised and the elderly are the people who are most affected by this because they can't bear to stand in the sun for so long. Next slide. Next slide. So whatever, can you go to the previous slide? So what our solution is, we are using video counters that can be integrated in CCTVs to provide real-time foot traffic to people. Like if there is 20 people in Walmart, they will show exact 20 people right now, and they can schedule their time by that. Next slide. So this is our video counter. This is what we made after the hackathon. So it will count people, and then it will take care of the offline and virtual queue both, and set up a time of appointment for them. Next slide. Next slide, please. So we are helping them book flexible appointments, and also we are making a function where we can auto alert them about risk factors, status updates, and providing virtual waiting rooms for the clinics, and also helping volunteering, community volunteering by friendly neighborhood system. Next slide. So this is how our system works. So people can come in our app and check the crowdiness there is and plan their visit, so go in our virtual queue, and then wait until their turn comes. Next slide. So this is what we are providing to the retail insights. We are providing customer demographics, exact conversion and churn rates, where the people are coming from, and competitive benchmarking, so that our counters can work for both the stores and the people. Next slide. So there are so many people who are doing this, but we are better because we are using video counters, and that's why we take care of offline and virtual queue both. Next slide. So we are going to be a freemium model after the pandemic is over, and we are going to let the public be the user of the free version, and the retail shops be the user of premium versions. Next slide. So we are helping both the people to look into what they're what timings they want, and the stores to gain insights on their retail insights. So we are helping all our stakeholders and increasing stakeholder value. Next slide. Next
we'll
slide.
give you just a few more seconds here.
Yeah, so this is the future market scope. We have a very large customer segment. We can do it for logistics. We can apply this for pharmacies. We can increase the security in government agencies, and even increase inventory management. So next slide. So this is it. Thank you. And do you have any questions?
I have a question. This is Karen. Can you talk a little bit in detail about your targeted customer at which stage?
So our target customers are the retail stores, like supermarkets, like so that they can incorporate this into their supermarkets. They will just download our API, video counter API, and we will get their foot counts, number of people present right at the moment at the store and outside the store. And we will provide this information to the general public, like Google Popular Times is doing. And then they can book flexible appointments with that. And we will also provide demographics and people, where are people coming from to the retail stores.
In line with that question, actually the last one. So what's your plan for implementation? Do you want to run a pilot at a certain set of clients first? Where are you going to go? Do you have some steps in line?
Actually, we are looking for a few clinics or supermarkets where we can test this, because we need to test our video counters and our appointment system for 1 or 2 weeks, check all the security issues. And there is a lot of problem in people's, like we have to be sure that people's data is not misused. So this all things are going to take 3 or 4 weeks. So after that, we can launch fully. But before that, I think it's a pilot model. Any other questions?
All right, we're going to move on to the next team, Doctors at Home. Thank you so much for your presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. I will be using the post-its for the next slide change, okay? So I will just rise them up whenever I need to change the slide. Okay?
I'm not fully sure what you mean.
No, that for the change of the slides, can I just signal them with the post-it that I put up?
Please just say next slide like all the other, just so that we can keep this moving. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so my friend in Sao Paulo wasn't completely sure if he had COVID or flu, and he didn't want to risk going to the hospital as he is in the risk group due to diabetes. Luckily, some doctors started to provide telemedicine service, so he contacted a doctor in Rio, but the connection kept breaking up during his consultation, and payment was another issue, as the doctor did not accept credit cards. To make matters worse, local pharmacy did not want to accept the prescription. From the recent survey, 76% of people are now interested in using telehealth going forward, but they ask for integrated digital platform. Next. Doctors at Home is next generation telemedicine service that provides a 360 health platform experience, both for the patient and for the doctor, including our neutral adaptive video streaming that solves bandwidth problems as is integrated with secure digital drug prescription. Next. Since last hackathon, with help of Novo Nordisk, we interviewed 88 doctors in Chile, our beachhead market. We talked also with doctors in Brazil, India, and Taiwan. We solve a real problem that doctors and patients are facing today. Our platform is live as of yesterday. During the weekend, we performed the first test consultations with the doctor from Taiwan, which is a big achievement since last hackathon. Next, we are developing a new feature to connect our platform with local pharmacies that we are already in contact with to provide and deliver drugs using partners like Rappi and reduce exposure and add value to the whole chain. Next, our plan is to finish our MVP in the next 30 days. We already have 70 doctors interested in trying our solution. We plan to onboard 100 doctors and perform at least 1,000 consultations during the first month after launch. We will charge 10% service fee to the doctors. We assume the capex of 40,000 for the first commercial version of the platform. The biggest cost is marketing and legal. Next. And this is also why we are looking for legal advisory for data protection to prepare all legal forms, both for the doctors and for the partners and patients. We are looking for mentor doctors, data scientists to create models for digital assistant for doctors, UX design experts, and integrator engineer. Next. Those are the people that we are missing in the current team, but we have a great team, including AWS expert, developers, and marketing specialists. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we'll turn it over for 2 minutes of Q&A. And Team Fast Track AI, if you wouldn't mind just raising your hands. I'm going to lower everyone's hand, and then if you could raise your hands again, that would be great. And just so everybody knows, we will take a break after that. Thank you.
Can you address some of the regulatory limitations and how that can impact the scalability of this type of telemedicine program?
Yes, so we have been in contact with the lawyers here in Chile and also in Brazil. So it's mostly on the GDPR, on the data protection, and this is quite universal. So we can adapt the agreements both for the doctors and patients and adapt them in different countries, but the core is the same.
I think in your example, you talked about Chile, you talked about Taiwan. How would you get over things like language and cultural barriers?
Yes, so currently we are building the website in 5 languages. So, but our first language is English and Spanish. for the Chilean market, definitely in Spanish. We also add Portuguese, as we would like to enter into Brazilian market.
And I'm sorry, I missed your team number. Can you reiterate?
It's team 14, I-14.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question of whether or not doctors who maybe haven't yet adopted telemedicine, how they kind of go down this route, because are they willing to do so now? Is this kind of push them into that? And what would be the value add of your approach versus kind of an overarching telemedicine platform that they might use?
Yes, thank you for the question. We asked this question also in our survey, and we got a reply that 59% of the doctors, they trust that they will continue with the telemedicine service after COVID. So it's not only for the emergency.
Excellent, thank you. And we're gonna leave it there and move right on to our next team, Fast Track AI. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
So hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So welcome to Fast Track AI. Telehealth professionals need a way to triage at-home patients with pre-existing conditions with or without COVID-19 so that they can see the urgent cases first. Next, please. So did you know that we can drop ER visits by 50% while making sure that everyone gets access to healthcare? Next, please. Our solution is an intelligent triaging mobile system, assisting individuals needing care regardless of their technology limitations. Now, our product ensures maximum accessibility because in addition to the Android app, we also have SMS and support center features. Next, please. So in terms of the front end, our latest prototype allows you to enter your medical history and symptoms in a very simple and conversational way. Then the Acuity Index will determine the urgency of your situation. Now, let's talk about the back end.
Hi guys, so for the next please. Our idea for the back end is to make symptom checking simple, easy, and fast so that it's easy for patients to input their symptoms on a wide range of options and get reliable advice. Next, please. The output of the Symptom Checker module includes recommendations to patients based on their risk level. Next, please. And so, with this simple yet effective list that users quickly complete with their symptoms and medical history, we can get a good idea of which patients are most urgently in need and help the healthcare system prioritize them. Next, please. With our machine learning backend that we prototyped and tested this weekend, we can make predictions about each patient's level of risk. Next, please. Our model was trained on 773,005 observations and is highly reliable. Our model helps reduce the strain on the healthcare system by assigning patients who really need treatment higher scores than less vulnerable individuals. And next, I'll hand it over to Ryan. And could you unmute Ryan N in the participants? It seems like he can't raise his hand, if that's possible. Ryan N.
Yep, all set.
Yeah. Thank you.
It seems like Ryan's having a hard time unmuting himself. I keep pressing ask to unmute, so I'm going to ask you to continue the presentation just for time's sake.
All right. So for the competitive landscape, we do have many advantages over other participants. So we have a roadmap that we would like to show you. Next, please. So our roadmap is that we want to communicate with telehealth platform corporations such as Zipnosis and Amwell to make sure that we can get the data storage, the HIPAA compliant database that we need. And we also want to partner with healthcare organizations such as the American College of Physicians, Johns Hopkins University, and Partners Healthcare.
JD, can you hear me? I
Yeah.
can take over now.
Okay, good.
So next slide, please. So here are some of the next steps we'll be taking. We plan to partner with telehealth platforms and healthcare care organizations to gain access to more accurate data and update our model. Then we plan to test our product in coordination with our partners to reassess our overall process and revise when necessary. After development, we'll deploy our product. Next, please. Next, please. We're a diverse team committed to hacking the healthcare system. We come from a variety of backgrounds: business, bioengineering, computer science, and data science, and that is going to help bring our idea to fruition. Thank you for listening.
All right, excellent. Thanks so much, and we'll turn it over for 2 minutes of Q&A.
Hey team, what in your backend do you have that would make Fast Track AI an improvement on current EMS and ER triage programs?
Yeah, so we over this weekend we made a prototype and we tested our back-end machine learning model for triage. And one aspect of it is our model is highly accurate and it achieved 77.6% accuracy. And we hope that by going forward and getting more data, we can improve that accuracy. And it seems like our model has high predicting power for different clinical conditions, not just for COVID-19.
Any other questions from the judges? All right, well, thank you guys very much. And what we're gonna do now with Fast Track AI done, we're gonna take a quick 5-minute break so that everybody can just catch a breather. I know it's a lot to take in, but so far I'm super excited about all of the progress that we've seen. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna leave it here. I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes and we will all reconvene then. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. We've now passed 5 minutes. So I think what we should do is continue on with the show. I'm really excited. We've got 8 more presentations and we're gonna go ahead and kick it off with Team Go With The Flow. So Team Go With The Flow, if you could just go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom. That way we can get you all queued up to speak and present. And Henry, if you could just reshare the presentations.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Faith Ilesomi from Team Go With The Flow. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. Yeah, so this is our team made up of engineers and an epidemiologist. Next slide, please. So there's a massive shortage of ventilators due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Ventilators are costly and time-consuming to manufacture, and then there's no safe and viable solution. Next slide, please. Our proposed solution is a split kit, which can accommodate patients of different ages and different lung damage severities using flow rate control with minimal cross-contamination. It's low cost, easy to assemble, and fits all existing ventilators. Next slide, please. Imagine a scenario in which you have 12 patients needing ventilator treatment and there are only 6 ventilators available. 6 split kits will allow this need to be temporarily met. Next slide, please. So this is our workflow, first from collecting vital signs of the patient, pairing patients with similar lung compliance, adjusting the flow rate, monitoring the tidal volumes and pressure, and then repeating the flow process. Next slide, please. So this is a MATLAB simulation. The existing market solution shows similar flow and pressure profiles for both patients, but the split kit shows customizable flow and pressure profiles for multiple patients sharing a ventilator. Next slide, please. So this is the design. And then for our protocol, following the HHS protocol, we want to confirm the patient has COVID-19, want to ensure that the patients have similar oxygenation needs, rule out other comorbidities like asthma and COPD, follow the ventilator parameters, decontaminate devices, and follow all the parameters. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so the projected cost per unit is $354. Estimated time to build a single unit is 12 hours with 2 commercial 3D printers. Next slide, please. this is the bill of materials. Next slide, please. So our progress so far, we have a prototype developed, and we've been having meetings with regulatory consultants from CleanLogix and business development experts. And we've also been speaking with teams from Nelson Laboratories, Pacific Biolabs, and other medical device firms. Next slide, please. So our need actually our major need is funding, and followed by funding, we need patenting, device classification, FDA collaboration, medical device validation, preclinical and clinical trials, and market approval. A timeline could be 6 weeks to 1 year based on our met need. Next slide, please. So this is the existing solution, and this is our solution. Next slide, please. Okay, our references, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll open it up for 2 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah, thank you.
Could you explain how you're able to regulate the airflow? It looked like a pretty straightforward device. So just curious how you were able to regulate that differently for the patient.
Yeah, so there's a sensor, and I don't know if other members of the team are here, but there's a sensor and valve that's supposed to be used to regulate the flow rates. Using there's a check valve that is supposed to be used to regulate the flow rate.
Okay, so you would have an independent flow rate adjuster basically, and it would have a different monitor on each of those.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I was just and I think you guys should always open with that Queens of the Stone Age song, by the way. But I was wondering if you have any launching customers in mind, any hospitals you talk to that would be willing to actually, or providers that would be willing to buy your product.
So I think that's the issue we're facing now. We've not been able to actually own down on one hospital because we're still trying to get funding, and we've been talking to regulatory consultants, and their advice for us is first get the funds, then you can move ahead with other things, other parts of the process. But they were just like, we should get the funds first.
Have you done an IP review for this kind of technology already?
No, we've not. Okay. We have a prototype already developed, but that's where we're at, just at the prototype, but no IP review yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. And we're gonna go ahead and move on to our next team, Hot Potato.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, and we will go ahead and start the timer.
Okay. Hello, I'm one of the members from Hot Potato. And next slide. And we are working on developing a product and a service for family members and elderly people for COVID-19 checkups and mitigate response for SMS system and family assurance. So what we have done is we have market researched, we have built 2 prototypes and have gone to 3 hackathons and built our 2 prototypes there, and had 1 field work test in the in Connecticut local hospitals for prototype usage. And so we have pivoted this time and this hackathon for many reasons. And next slide. And so I'll like you first of all to know a couple of things. 53% of elderly use smartphones since 2017. And as of right now, hospital visits are down 60%, as well as deaths in elderly beginning at the most March are up 80%. So next slide. So this is our website. We have not launched it yet, but are almost there to launch it as well. Next slide. And so our mission is to create safe patient via doctor relationship by connecting the elderly with healthy experts while COVID-19. Next slide. And so what we propose is that the elderly elderly in developing countries must choose either isolated areas or risk factors to not expose to COVID-19 germs. So lack of location, lack of healthcare leads to unnecessary risks, as well as many data is needed to mitigate the healthcare service and personal location data. Next slide. So Quanto for OpenTable is a SMS system / web application that one mitigates money, time, and saves lives by scheduling appointments to help professionals by one, reassuring that family members are connected to those. All right. I won't have enough time to, Paul.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to leave it there just because we are at time. We can open it up for 2 minutes of questions.
All right.
So I'm a little unclear on what you had your mission statement there, but is it to prevent COVID patient, or when you have a potential COVID patient, from them actually having to go into the hospital before they can be diagnosed? Or are you actually talking to people who basically for other conditions, not necessarily COVID-19, but let's say you're an elderly person with a UTI or something that you need to be able to go to the hospital, you don't want to be exposed? That was unclear.
It's the second one where they have precondition, and they don't want to get risk. They don't want to risk the travel time and get COVID-19 by accident.
Okay, thank you.
How does medical information get exchanged around providers?
So we have talks with Microsoft and Skype for right now to actually use our APIs to actually secure them speaking to one another patient through a doctor, as well as revealing harmful data about them.
Any last questions from the judges?
I had one more question. So obviously it's a difficult patient group to focus on, the elderly that are maybe at home and don't have, people who maybe know how to use these types of websites. So have you done some assessments to see whether or not these patients would be able to use the telemedicine?
So if I actually have a slide where it shows how the family member actually gets their appointments, and then has we have our SMS system actually sent the elderly person a message and a link to click before actually meeting with the physician or doctor.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And we are going to have to move on to the next team for the purposes of time.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we will have Team Pony Express.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, that we can. We'll go ahead and start the timer here.
Hi, we're Pony Express. Next, please. And next. Imagine you live in a neighborhood of 3 people. Next. And once a week, you guys all have to go to groceries. Next. You all meet up again in front of the store, waiting for entering the store. Next. And this is a lot of exposure to the COVID-19 virus. Next. And next. Not only grocery stores are a breeding ground for COVID-19 transmission. Next. If you choose online vendors like Amazon for your groceries, shipping delays and other issues may arise. Next. Lastly, existing delivery systems such as Instacart may pressure sick workers to continue working and consequently endanger others. Next. To fill this need gap, we've created Pony Express. Next. During the last, Wenxi? So this is our website, and as you can see, this is how you can fill out a request. And here you can enter the amount of money that you estimate for your requesting groceries. And here you fill out your contact names and your phone number. And we have all these check marks for identifying whether you are are you elderly or immunocompromised, for which we'll give you a priority queue. And here we have filters for distance and dates before which these requests needed to be fulfilled.
One more minute.
And here, if you want to offer delivery, you need to sign up your name and your phone, and also agree to the social distancing protocols. And here we have a real-time thank you note that the requester or the deliverer can post. And here we have a very extensive list of FAQ, and we also have logging with Google and Facebook. And I think all my team members are muted. Could you unmute Ella?
Oh, I'm here. Sorry, could you go to the next slide? So with Pony Express, 3 people can now post their grocery lists. Next, please, I think 3 times. And the 4th can make a trip that week and deliver to their neighbors. Next, and once more. And this way, everyone can still get what they need while limiting their exposure to COVID-19. Next, twice. Once more. Oh, sorry, one back. So not only does Pony Express reduce social interaction and help those who are unable to commute, but it also promotes community action, which is something that Instacart and Uber Eats doesn't really have. On top of that, it improves safety, and because Pony Express is a completely volunteer-based service, our demand can always be met. So next slide, and thank you so much.
Great, thank you, and we'll move on to 2 minutes of Q&A.
Thank you, team. And also, I'd seen you guys during the first hack. I am curious, and it could have been in the presentation, but what are the steps you've taken since the last hack? So what were the deliverables of the last few weeks?
Oh, yes, sorry. Sorry that wasn't very clear, but we've actually created our website, and we are currently doing alpha testing in the Palo Alto area. And so we are just, from the last hackathon, we had this idea and we had, a general mock-up made up, but now we've actually instated our website, and we're currently looking for help with those who can help us market this out. Our team members, we've personally been reaching out to lots of small grocery stores to try to get partnerships with them, along with perhaps partnering with Nextdoor. So we're really just looking to push and roll this out right now.
Thank you.
Is there a revenue model to this?
So we're currently a nonprofit. So what we're really looking for is to be able to allow people to get the groceries they need without any price barrier. And so we don't have a service fee, and the only extra charge would be a courtesy tip that you would be giving to your courier.
Any last questions from the judges?
What do you see as your major competition? I'm thinking maybe like Nextdoor and all those other sites, so neighbors are already kind of in touch with each other through that. Is that maybe another way you could look at this?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we're actually hoping to be able to partner with Nextdoor. So not only do they already have like a really tight-knit community model going on, so we are hoping to be able to partner with them and let these community members and neighbors go through Nextdoor and use Pony Express as a way to set up these grocery deliveries. But of course, as you mentioned, that there are also other like grocery delivery services, Instacart, Uber Eats. And so I think our main advantage over that is that we're, one, strictly volunteer-based, and two, we have no service charge. We're not looking to make a profit here. This is really just a way to get people to help each other.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We are going to have to move on to the next presentation for the sake of time. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And next up, we will have Team Spread the Facts. And Elizabeth, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute.
Great. I'm also going to turn off my video so it helps with bandwidth.
Sure.
Great.
All right, you can start whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay, so just first slide. This is Spread the Facts, empowering low-income African-American populations to protect themselves and their communities against COVID-19. Next slide. On April 1st, when we began this, there was very little known about the impact of COVID-19 on African-American populations. One of few articles published noted that due to unequal health outcomes, African-Americans suffered at much higher rates from pre-existing health conditions such as high blood pressure, heart disease, and diabetes that made them vulnerable to the novel virus. Next slide. Since then, a number of articles have been written on the issue that has made it very clear. Next slide. The problem is African Americans represent roughly a third of coronavirus cases, despite making up only 13% of the population. Next slide. Evelyn Hammonds, professor of African American Studies at Harvard, has underlined exactly what to do from previous epidemics and how to address pre-existing health inequalities during a crisis. There's a need to communicate on multiple formats on what puts African Americans at risk and what they can do to change their behavior. At the time, however, Hammonds described efforts to reach out to African Americans as, quote, patchy. Next slide. So our solution is just that, a communications campaign on multiple formats focusing specifically on low-income African-American populations with population-specific info and local resources to help individuals protect themselves and their families. We use repackaged content from the CDC and other credible sources with help from physicians at partner hospitals to develop a complete toolkit of communication resources for these communities. Next slide. Next slide. We are also developing an SMS text service to be able to continue communications with community members and build trust to understand their questions and needs. Next slide. We chose Roxbury, Mass as our text market. Roxbury is 40% African American with high population density, low household income, and high unemployment. It is also in the top 5 neighborhoods in Boston for cases with close to 1,000 cases in just this community alone. Next slide. We work with physicians at Brigham and Women's Hospital to review content and the Boston Public Health Commission to obtain masks and other PPE to distribute. Next slide. We also worked with their local elected representative, China Tyler. Here's a photo of China distributing masks to us at a local bus station that the Boston Globe picked up. Next slide. We have distributed a total of 4,500 flyers and masks, assisting almost 1 in 5 African-American residents in this neighborhood, many of whom were not wearing masks. Next slide. Our new goal between now and August is to reach an additional 15,500 residents with info and masks. That makes 20,000 total, or 80% of African-American residents in Roxbury. Models show that if 80% of residents in a community wear masks, that's enough to stop the spread of the disease, saving hundreds of lives. Next slide. We will then use feedback to develop a scalable toolkit to expand our work in other communities in Boston, such as Dorchester, and other states such as Texas and Washington, D.C. We need only $1,500 between now and August to continue to produce materials and cover other costs. Next slide. We have a great team of professionals with years of experience looking to grow and bring on additional officers. Thank you for your time, and remember, Black Lives Matter, and we can help save them by spreading the facts. Next slide. Last slide.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And now we'll transition over to 2 minutes of Q&A from the judges.
Thanks. That was a great presentation. There's been similar communications campaigns for other infectious diseases like sexually transmitted diseases and HIV. How are you, are you aligning with any of these other well-developed networks to kind of integrate into the same kind of functionality?
So my background is in local public affairs. So I work in relationships between the hospitals and Harvard. So we have some great resources with folks that work specifically as the point people between the hospitals and academic institutions with the community, and know a lot about implementing these solutions in real time. So we've worked with the community affairs person at Brigham and Women's. I've also worked with the Harvard Public Affairs team and other folks in the community, again, that specifically focus on our target market to make sure that we're doing a great job in this one community before scaling up, if that helps answer your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the judges?
How do you deal with some of the real logistics issues with regards to spread, like overcrowding?
Logistics issues in terms of?
Some of these neighborhoods are really, it's not just a communication issue, but a logistics issue with many people residing in the same home or you know, being without a home, etc.
Absolutely. So you know, as we're saying in our presentation, that we know that there are pre-existing factors here that is beyond sort of the scope of what you can do in a communications campaign in a short amount of time, that we're coming up sort of against decades and centuries of unequal outcomes for African Americans. So our solution is really to do what we can in a communications campaign. So talking candidly with African Americans about the conditions they find themselves in, and what they can do in the current climate to protect themselves by wearing masks, knowing that they live in close quarters with other individuals, making sure that they are washing their hands and taking other precautions and taking this seriously. Not that they're not taking it seriously, but knowing that there are things they can do despite the conditions that are not their fault at all. But there are things that they can do to try to protect themselves.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. We do need to move on to the next presentation. And the next presentation is Team Taking Back 2020.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, that we can.
All right, we're ready to start. Hi, so my name is Daniel, and I'm representing Taking Back 2020. Given the uncertainty many low-income patients are facing given the recent COVID-19 pandemic, we're here to present Next Step. It's an SMS platform connecting patients to community resources during and beyond this pandemic. Next slide. Many safety net hospitals cannot provide the social resources that their patients need due to overcrowding. And during this pandemic, social workers and nurses in these hospitals struggle with limited PPE, which further diminishes their ability to discharge patients and provide them with social resources. A nurse told me how he often needs to rush the discharge to get the bed open and keep himself safe, often by skipping social work. This means we're missing a critical opportunity to address the social determinants of health. Next slide. Because these social resources are so crucial to patient well-being, our goal is to create an SMS-based platform for patients to receive information on community resources and connect with social work. Next slide. Our resources were extensively developed in both English and Spanish translations and include information about social resources in local and national scales. We aim to connect our patients to specific organizations within these documents, given their express needs and parameters such as location. Next slide. Next Step works like this. First, the patient enrolls in the SMS system during their discharge. They'll then be connected with specific resources based on a survey. And then they'll be reminded of the resources and given opportunity to give feedback on their usefulness. And once the patient is in the system, they can continue to receive resources no matter where they are. Next slide. Since the last hackathon, we've developed a database of social resources and formed partnerships with programmers, patient navigators, and hospital administrators. During this hackathon, we've developed a prototype and a basic decision tree for our survey to connect patients to resources. Next slide. Here's our current SMS system in which patients talk with a chatbot to connect with the resource. They have the option to continue to a different resource type, receive a compilation of all their matched resources, or exit the survey. Next slide. Once our basic prototype is complete, we'll begin field testing and add improved search features and a front end for workers to interface with the database. Importantly, we plan to implement a user randomization process in order to test different survey formats and find the most effective strategy. This will allow any hospital to optimize any survey to their desired needs. As we continue to iterate using clinician and user feedback, we plan on improving the user experience and making our searches more intelligent through the creation of user groups. Next slide. We plan to implement our completed solution at Ben Taub Level 1 Trauma Center and gather information to improve our model before expanding it to other medical centers. We expect our current model to cost about $1 per patient per year. Next slide. Next step is a unique solution that connects patients with social resources in the discharge process while protecting medical professionals. The pandemic has exacerbated health disparities and is more crucial than ever to address patients' social needs. Through Next Step, we can do this and more, but we need your support to improve health outcomes for millions of patients. Next slide. Thank you so much for your time, and we'd love to hear any of your thoughts or any of your questions. Thanks.
Excellent, thanks. And we'll go ahead with 2 minutes of Q&A.
Thank you for this presentation. I think it's really prescient that you started to work on this, several weeks ago when we're just now kind of seeing the long-term damage potentially that COVID-19 can do to patients. So just curious whether or not you've had plans to see how you can incorporate tracking these patients and being able to get some data as we learn more about this disease.
Yeah, so what we're hoping to do is that because this is an SMS system that patients can access from anywhere, that'll give us the ability to actually know more about, where they're going to access these resources. We're going to be spending reminders to see if they are able to do that, because we've been doing this at this hospital for about 10 years now, but we've been doing it in person with patient navigators. And an issue with that is there isn't really a complete database tracking patients and how they're using these resources. And we usually do telephone calls, and those are pretty ineffective. We maybe reach 1 in 3 patients, but given that pretty much any patient has a cell phone with a text capability, we believe that our reach is going to be a lot larger and that we're going to be able to actually get much more information about these patients.
I missed whether you are planning to integrate into EMRs.
Yeah, so that's currently something that we're trying to look into. So we're currently partnering with this hospital in Houston, and we've been discussing with their administrators who manage the EMR. It's a lot more difficult because people are just very sensitive to HIPAA, but everything that we're currently using, like Twilio and the databases that we're going to set up, will be HIPAA compliant. So if we do need to optimize and match with a EMR in the future, that's something that we can definitely do.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Excellent. And with that, we will move on to our next presentation from the couple and the others. Thanks so much, guys.
Awesome, thank you. Next slide. Cool, next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So meet Anna. She's a 27-year-old living in New York City. Because she's been home so often, she's spending a lot of time browsing through Facebook. And in doing this, she encounters, next slide, article, next slide, after article of horror stories of Asian Americans getting attacked for no reason other than the color of their skin. Next slide. So even though Anna was born and raised in Queens, she doesn't feel safe going out, even for groceries. But also deep inside, she wishes she spoke out more. It's 2020. There's no reason for this kind of racism. Next slide. That's where A Voice for Us comes in. This past weekend, we created a data visualization of race-related incidents against Asians. Our mission is to enable Asians to be vigilant for both themselves and their families. Next slide. So here we see an interactive map of recently reported hate crimes or incidents against Asians. So basically, you can enter your zip code or location up there, which will then show you a magnified view of incidents reported in your town. When you click on a data point on the map, it's linked with the description of the incident, so that could be a news article or an individual submission. Next slide. In the span of 1 weekend, we were able to code up an entire data visualization. So what you see here is actually live code, and you can access it, next slide, at this site. So I want to talk about how we're collecting the data and getting the news to our users. We have 3 ways. Next slide. First, we use individual reports of race-related incidents. So users can actually individually report an incident with this form. Next slide. We'll also be scraping the internet for related news articles. We know there's a lot of fake and even malicious news. So we've already figured out how to integrate a machine learning model so we can give our users the highest quality news possible. Next slide. And finally, we'll be partnering with organizations who actually currently collect incident reports. We've already initiated conversation with several of them. We'll actually be meeting with the founder of I'm Not a Virus next week to discuss future collaboration plans. Next slide. We've made sure to keep our users in mind every step of the way. So we took this weekend as an opportunity to dive deep into if and why they should use our product. Next slide. We found that in general, users read the news because they fear for their own safety. Next slide. That's why when we showed our prototype to users, every single person mentioned that they would enter their own zip code and they would put in their family zip codes because they're concerned about them and for their safety. Next slide. And we even validated this through Instagram. People are anxious and concerned, and rightfully so. Next slide. So this really confirmed our initial assumption. A voice for us enables agents to be vigilant for themselves and their families. Next slide. In terms of next steps, we don't want to just show users where hate crimes are. We want to guide them on how to respond if they ever are a victim or bystander. So all of our potential partner organizations have very interesting and specific data. And so we wanted to use this to guide people on how to respond. Next slide. And finally, we want to expand our tool to be available to our Black, Latinx, and LGBTQ brothers and sisters, because in the end, our voices are absolutely stronger together. Next slide. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, and perfect timing. We'll turn it over for 2 minutes of Q&A.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm assuming that you are acting as a not-for-profit, but I do wonder, because it's going to take time to set this all up and to manage it. Like, what are you thinking about a revenue stream or funding?
Yeah, so our data, the data that we collect from individual submissions, and also the data that we scrape from news articles, we figure that could be very valuable for research or for the government. And so we're potentially looking into finding a revenue stream through that as well.
You talked about a machine learning algorithm that would select highest quality news articles. Could you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, sure. Could you go 2 slides forward? Yeah, so we actually found FakeBox, which is an API that actually already sorts out for fake news. So over the weekend, we found out how we can adapt it to identify the legitimate versus illegitimate news concerning these race-related incidents against Asians. And so we're going to kind of use the results the output from this machine learning model and feed it into the front end of the system.
One more question.
Yeah, sure.
If we have time, hate crimes existed before coronavirus. Has anything like this ever been deployed before?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have looked, and there doesn't seem to be anything completely exactly the same as what we're doing. There's organizations where you can report race-related incidents or hate crimes, but they don't seem to actually expose that public data. They don't have any kind of visualization for that. So that's where we figured we can kind of close the gap and make it more consumer friendly.
Excellent. And we're going to have to move on to the next presentation now. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Team WePool. Team WePool, do we have you here? Guillermo? Anybody from Team WePool?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go ahead and get started here.
Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Guillermo, and we are WePool. We are one of the winners for round 1 in the testing and diagnostics track, and we've been thinking about intelligent pool testing. Next, the problem we tried to tackle back then hasn't changed. Shortages in testing are preventing containment. We know that only 5% of the population has been tested, and even this small amount has already overwhelmed the system, and some countries collapsed it. And when you compare it to the predicted proportion to become infected, it's a ridiculous disparity. So we need more testing. Next. And the solution that we landed on was pool testing. The idea is to mix samples together and to test them with a single kit. If the mix is negative, then it means everyone was negative. If it's positive, then you can test individually or break that set and try pooling again. We're maximizing information per test. Next. Now, as the virus becomes more common, the probability of encountering at least one positive that might spoil this optimization will keep increasing. So this is how WePool comes in. With machine learning and by consuming patient data, our algorithm can predict prevalence rates, which samples are most likely to be negative, and then we pool them. So this intelligent segmentation is what enables the efficient use of pool testing. Next. And the results from our simulation so far have been fantastic. At minimum, through simple pooling alone, we can save 40% of test kits, but with intelligent pooling, we can increase capacity 3 times over. So that enables us to move away from a system where you have to show symptoms to get tested. Next, we had been working nonstop for 2 months, and there were weeks where very little happened. And then just in a few days, it felt like we achieved months worth of progress and got lots of responses. We're partnering with the VA, University of California for the medical data. We've been working with our mentors every single week on simulations and getting our model data ready for its training. And in the meantime, the subject has become a really hot topic. The FDA even cleared pool testing recently. Next. And now this weekend, we are inches away from incorporating and starting our own company and getting ready for what's next after the model trains itself at UCSF or the VA. We've added team members who have really helped us understand, okay, from a testing facility perspective, what does it mean for the PCR testing process if WePool came in terms of navigating regulatory compliance? How do we avoid a medical designation that might reduce our time to market? We're thinking about intellectual property and starting to work on the software that will house our model. Next, so there is a lot I wish I could share with you, but with just 3 minutes, next please. But with just 3 minutes, I'll leave you with this. This is our roadmap, which we propose to the organizations we'll be partnering with. So milestones that we're already discussing with them, clinical trials for pool testing using our tech, publications, widespread implementation, and preparing for the next pandemic or local epidemics. And for that, we're super thankful for what this hackathon set in motion for us in round 1, but we're even more excited for what's coming. So thank you. And with that, we have an appendix full of supporting documentation. And you have any questions or recommendations, we could talk to you about this for like 7 hours or so. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll turn it over for 2 minutes of Q&A.
This great presentation. Does your algorithm for estimating prevalence rely on epidemiologic data alone, or is it a clinically simulated pretest probability type of prevalence?
This is a great question. If you scroll down, Henry, you'll find there's a table that shows us the sort of data sets that the VA and others have. To answer, yeah, that one. So to answer your question, yeah, we would rely on clinical testing data that we know that UCSF and the VA have. And by simple pooling alone, then it's a great improvement on current testing capacity. But through the use of, for example, contact tracing information and symptoms data, which in many cases it's unstructured and we would have to make a lot of work to normalize it. But this is really the advantage, to have per patient, 1 patient per row and different columns to feed the algorithm to pool a segmentation. Does that help answer your question?
That helps. This is a huge advantage in the pooling process. With that in mind, have you actually ran this model and developed it by hand weights or just through the VA data? There have been a number of models that have been presented subsequently.
Yeah, we have, you can scroll up and I will let Yash speak if he's online, or Smriti. Oh yeah, that one, the one below. So we have ran simulations with assuming prevalence rates and assuming different sorts of information that has been publicly available so far. And we have ran our current model. Essentially right now it's a shell that can be replaced with the real data that we're relying on. So the simulations are an output of these simulations that are, sorry, the simulation results are an output of the sort of model that I'm speaking of.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We are going to move on to our next and final presentation. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm excited for our last presentation before we move into deliberations. That will be Team Coronate. So Emery?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Let us just get to your slide really quickly. All right, awesome. And whenever you're ready.
Next, please. Your Team Coronate. Next, please. Union Square, Somerville is where I live. It used to be a quite vibrant and lively place with a close-knit community and nice places. After COVID hit Boston, my favorite restaurant in Union Square is no longer open. And I talked to its owner and he's saying that it'll be really hard to revive its spirit even if the restrictions are lifted. Next. It's because most of the US population is afraid of visiting local shops even if the local restrictions are lifted. Customers cannot be sure if the shop they want to visit has COVID countermeasures, such as masks, sanitizers, or social distancing rules. Next. As a solution to these problems, Coordinate offers an app-based platform and a venue for local communities that allows customers to view and rate the protective measures implemented by shop owners. The customers will rate the protective measures while Coordinate provides verification for shops and accurate shop information to customers. Next. Coordinate app is easy to use and intuitive. Sign up, search, view, and rate, all in one and simple. Next. Using Coordinate, customers will be able to both view and rate COVID countermeasures such as mask and social distancing. If a customer gives a poor score to a criteria, Coordinate will ask for a constructive comment, and it will be directed to the shop owner to improve customer safety instantly. Next. Coordinate provides not only COVID-related reviews, but we also provide updated business hours and their mode of operation. Next. It will also give you more detailed information and you'll be able to rate and view the details about the shop. You'll be able to see if they're providing enough sanitizers and if they're checking your temperature. Next. And you'll be able to rate them. If it's not enough, just click not enough. If it's okay, click it's okay, and then you'll be able to leave a comment. If it's good, coordinate the business and say okay. Next. So we're also implementing a verification feature. Shops can request to be verified by Coordinate, and we will pay them informed visits to confirm social distancing. Once they're verified, we'll provide them stickers, and then on our app, they will be shown as coordinated. Next, please. The customers will be able to check in. The check-ins will be voluntary, and then we'll be recording store visit times. There'll be geofenced automatic checkout. It'll be all privacy preserving. Next. We are creating value for communities. We're creating safer shop environments. They expedite local economic recovery, and then we are providing risk monitoring for COVID. Next. How are we different? We are striving to reestablish the trust between the community and the local shops. Next, please. There are many review applications. Yelp specializes on quality of service. Zagat specializes on restaurants and bars, even though they provide verification. TripAdvisor and Foursquare are also relevant, but they are actually in a different space. Next. We provide a lot of advantages over these platforms. Our content is more focused on COVID. We are not collecting any reviews on quality of service, and it will not taint any reviews that we collect. We also provide location verification, check-in, and direct and instant feedback to shop owners. Next. The market size is huge. The total market size is almost 7 billion for online review platforms. And for business ratings and reviews, it's 400 million. Next.
We're over, so just speed it up and wrap up.
So the business model is basically similar to the one, our competitors. Next. And we can actually pivot to other scenarios after COVID. Next slide. I love my team. I cannot say more. That's it. Let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome, thank you. And we'll transition right into 2 minutes of Q&A.
I'll start out. What is your marketing plan? How will you build up a critical supply of customers and businesses?
So we will partner with basically local health authorities and also businesses. So we'll try to get as many businesses as possible on board. So we'll basically like coordinate them. So if a customer wants to visit them, they will see our sticker and they will visit our app. So that's one of the plans. And we're trying to like advertise this globally using global platforms such as Reddit and other venues.
Have you thought about working with other platforms that are already adopted, like OpenTable or Yahoo, or sorry, Yelp, where you can utilize this as kind of a, you know, coordinated kind of sticker on those apps? Because I feel like then you already have the market adaptation for those using those various tools that are already being widely used.
So we're using a backend in like we actually extract data from Google and Foursquare. But I think our advantage is basically we're aiming at, like, let's say you go to a restaurant, you negatively rate it, and then you'll be able to like instantly message the owner. So that's a platform that is not available in those systems because they want to keep it like more broad. We want to keep it more focused, and we want to deliver instant notifications to the shop owner.
Okay, thank you.
Any last questions?
So can you go to the next slide? I just wanted to just push this.
Cool, cool, thank you. Well, I think with that, we will wrap up the last of the presentations. Henry, if you could just advance a few slides here. I do want to just quickly wrap this up. I want to start by saying thank you to all the participants. You know, I think we saw some really impressive presentations here that represent a lot of progress, hard work, and you know, diligent effort that's gone into each of your projects over the course of the past 2 months since the first Beat the Pandemic hackathon. It's truly amazing. I'm honored to be able to work with you guys on this track. And I want to just say thank you. Thank you for all the time you've put in, all the effort that has gone into these projects and presentations. It's awesome. And if we can go to the next slide, we'll go 2 slides ahead. I also want to say thank you to our judges who have taken time out of their weekends, like I mentioned before, you know, to spend time judging a hackathon, which probably isn't everybody's first choice, but I know that the questions that were just asked were so thoughtful, and I want to highlight that. It really is to your benefit, participants. So thank you to all of our judges, and if we could just give them all a round of applause, even with microphones muted. You know, it's awesome to have you guys here. If you could just go to the next slide. So in terms of next steps, we are going to deliberate on the winners. And then what we'll do is we'll have everybody join us back in that Zoom link at 4 p.m. Eastern for the award ceremony. That Zoom link will also be shared momentarily in our Track Slack channel. And we will see you there. We're really looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun. And again, I appreciate everybody's work and efforts. And yeah, we'll all follow up via Slack. Thank you for your presentations. And with that, we will end out this Zoom meeting.